Welcome to episode 2 of Superhero Chicken Fest by Door Monster. This episode was kind of unplanned, but we had Ricky over and we wanted to make full use of him before he dematerialized back onto his plane of existence again, so we decided to do another episode of the podcast as well as the videos that we shot with him. This episode contains spoilers for some of the Sam Raimi Spider-Man films, Scott Pilgrim vs. the World, Chronicle, and possibly Kick-Ass. It's pretty spoiler light this episode because we're talking about visuals and not the stories, so unless you're especially sensitive about having anything spoiled for you in any of those particular movies, it shouldn't be too much of a problem. Audible.com did not pull their sponsorship after last episode, which means if you head on over to audibletrial.com/doormonster, you can still get a free audiobook and a 30-day free trial. They have 180,000 titles to choose from. They are available on all of your favorite listening devices. And if you're like me, you don't have time to read books as much as you might want to, and maybe you drive a lot, or have a job that's really boring, or you work on visual things and need something to listen to. And with Audible, you can catch up and then actually know what you're talking about whenever you get into discussions about the latest big novel or something. Why wouldn't you want me advertising your product, huh?
Superhero Chicken Fest!
Hey everybody, I'm Kyle.
I'm Allison.
I'm Ricky.
Welcome to Superhero Chicken Fest, the podcast based on the time when we went to watch superhero movies and then ate chicken. We now talk about the movies without the chicken. Maybe someday we will reintroduce the chicken here on the podcast, but at the moment we just have blueberries.
We had all the chicken yesterday.
We did. We had an entire tray full of Chick-fil-A chicken.
Oh my god.
120
so
chicken nuggets.
Split between 3 people.
We ate all of
It
them.
was $50 worth of chicken.
And then I went to the hospital.
Today's episode, well, yeah, no, not inaccurate. Today's episode is going to be about visual adaptations of comic books and video games and other visual medium, film adaptations of visual media. We're keeping it kind of vague this time, and hopefully keeping it nice and open. This will be a more casual podcast than I think last time, where we had like a lot to say about 2 movies and 4 people all trying to say it at the same time.
Right.
This time, this will be more of like an exploratory podcast, I guess. We're sort of like...
Oh man, freeform jazz
A little bit,
sessions?
yeah, freeform jazz podcast. We're just going to kind of see where we go, see what we come up with. It'll be mostly about visuals, because I'm the only like specific writer skill tree class here. Allison knows more about visual stuff, and Ricky has opinions on visual stuff.
I have opinions.
In terms of adaptation, we are sticking to the way that you visually make it look on screen, and how close people in different movies try to get that to the original source material, and whether or not that's good and what the right ways of doing that are, is kind of what I'm thinking of, like the angle I'm thinking of going at it.
I think it's a good one.
Yeah. So we've been talking about just keeping in theme. We were talking about Spider-Man yesterday.
As everybody is talking about.
Right. We did our podcast on Spider-Man right before Spider-Man came out, so now there's more Spider-Man. But we're not talking about that Spider-Man. We're talking about the first Spider-Man.
My favorite Spider-Man.
Right.
All the Spider-Mans.
All the
Kind of.
Spider-Men.
Yeah, that's true. The Sam Raimi Spider-Mans, though, specifically, we were I think we could open it to all of them, because they all kind of went comic booky in different ways, I feel like.
No, The Amazing Spider-Man is a movie.
The Amazing Spider-Man was definitely comic booky. Like, it was pure comic all the way through. It may not have been the kind of comic that you approve of, but it was definitely a comic book movie. Like, it was so comic-y. At one point, he had,
It had a lot of hard edges.
Like, he shows up and he has, like, a fish and, like, throws it into the closet. Like, there's, like, all these different things they do. Like, they go extreme with it. Ian was pointing out last time how they have like, the vials with the skull and crossbones on it. Like, it went pretty comic booky in its visuals.
I thought so.
It was also a lot... It was interesting to me because that one was really comic book and really video game. So kind of a nice mix of both of them. But we also talked about that one for, like, an hour, so...
Yeah, they know about that one.
Right, so...
I think that movie's beautiful.
Going back to... Ricky, start us off on the Sam Raimi Spider-Mans.
Like, why are they good?
Yeah, but visually specifically. Like
visually, why is because it looks like a Golden Age comic on the screen.
Refresh us on what exactly it looks like, because it's actually been a long time since I watched those 3 specifically.
It's a lot to do with just Sam Raimi's color choices. A lot of bright golds, oranges, and of course his primary colors very much pop. It's not a lot of darks, a lot of very vibrant colors like a blue sky, an American flag, The American flag, of course, because of 9/11. But
Hate that shot.
You hate that shot?
Yes, I do.
Everybody loves it in the first movie. It gets worse as the
Oh,
movies
sorry.
go
I'm
on.
thinking about the one in the third one specifically.
In the third one
that was the
specifically?
really just like almost obscene amount of American flag in that shot.
Yeah, well, the first one's really good.
Okay.
The first American flag shot's really good, and a lot of even the night scenes are really well lit, and there's still vibrant colors. Like the cart hanging is still very silver and red, and Green Goblin even is a very vibrant color.
It's interesting that
I
you
remember
mentioned
that.
Golden Age comics because they do have a very specific kind of brightly colored look.
Right.
Because it's not a high contrast movie. It's actually
It's a low
it's kind
contrast.
of washed out but still colorful in the way that comic books were.
Right.
Like it's
Low
the blacks
contrast,
aren't
high
super black.
saturation. Yeah.
Like they were like an Amazing Spider-Man. The blacks were dark.
Yeah.
It was really a high contrast movie, and the original ones did. Actually, it's our image. Like whoever's if you're listening to our podcast on YouTube right now, you're looking at a cover image that I based off of Silver Age comic cover designs. It's
Right.
basically that kind of color scheme is what the original Spider-Man movie had.
Right.
Which
Hey,
is,
even in the third one where it takes all the darker tones, you have the black suit and stuff like that. Like the dark the dark scenes happen, and you get a lot of darker scenes, but even those scenes are full of color. Like the dark, smoky jazz bar still has very vibrant colors all over
Right.
it. And even though Peter Parker is now all in his black suit and stuff like that, not the Spider-Man suit, but actually Peter Parker, there's still a lot of color around him.
it almost actually plays off of. I was always confused as a kid why in comic books anybody who was wearing black wasn't actually wearing black. They were wearing really dark blue all the time. You know what I'm talking about?
Are you sure about that?
Yes, in old comic art, when they're doing highlights on black, it's blue.
Because the
That's what
only,
they
yeah.
do.
the only
Like hair and
black
stuff?
that's allowed to be in the comic books, right? The only black you're allowed is
It's
for
like the outlines, I
the
guess.
the panels.
Yeah.
You don't want to make the same color as your panel because then everything you lose your
Right.
structure.
Well, they carried that over into the games sometimes. I remember game art, the original Spider-Man game for Nintendo 64 was all Black Cat and Venom were both a bluish color, specifically
Right.
because they were imitating the old comics.
Right.
And yeah, I think the Sam Raimi movies kind of followed suit with that a little bit. And then I don't know, what do you think about having just watched the new Spider-Man movie, in comparison to those other two? Was it basically the same or?
Well, I think it's kind of hard because the original Spider-Man movie, sort of the very first one with Tobey Maguire, it represents the time of how movies actually looked. And
Yeah.
the last one does that too. And I think that's kind of hard because even I was trying to look up clips and stuff of the first Spider-Man,
Mm-hmm.
and it has the low contrast look
Right.
that looks older now because that was just kind of how movies look now when you're watching them. And I'm the newest one has a bunch of what I thought were kind of Instagrammy looking shots. They're beautiful shots, but all of the ones of the downtown area with the sunset, that kind of stuff. I thought a lot of shots they specifically made just so that you can stare at them were done really, really well. But outside of that, I wasn't wowed
You
by
also
any color.
ever see anything that is not New York
Yeah.
in the original Spider-Man, right? In the same movie Spider-Man's, right? Not to say that things in the other movies aren't New York. They definitely are all New York. But when you think New York from a just purely fantasy, what does New York look like?
Yeah, that's a good
You're
point.
just thinking skyscrapers, crowded streets,
Taxis.
high-rise apartments, and small tenement buildings in certain areas. But even those are surrounded by street skyscrapers, and you are always there
Yeah.
in the Raimi Spider-Mans.
I
Yeah.
agree.
Even when
Did a
you're in the
great job with
park
that.
scenes, in Central Parks and stuff like that, you can still see all the buildings always surrounding. You're always in the city.
That's a good point.
And in any of the other Spider-Man movies, they go to locations that are just not what you think New York looks like. I mean, New
Yeah.
York looks like that because New York is, of course, a very big place and very varied and stuff
Right.
like that.
I
Yeah.
think the newest one was a lot more about composition than it was colors. The colors were all very nice, and they
You
were
s-
all very modern.
Yeah, you mentioned
But-
Instagram. It actually did kind of feel like that. Like, it didn't feel like an Instagram filter, but it
Right.
felt it had that modern photography look to it.
Yeah, that's what
Dude,
it was.
Amazing Spider-Man and the newest one, right? They do this thing. They do the text message scenes, right?
Did they do that
Which
in
ones?
Amazing
What is the text message scene?
Where they overlay
over
the
the-
text messages over the
Oh, the Sherlock thing, where they just like put the text like on the screen, basically, or
Was that what you're talking about?
Sherlock. I'm sorry, I didn't watch a lot of Sherlock.
oh,
Oh.
that is that was Sherlock is like known for they're sort of like one of the early
Like where you,
versions
like
of putting
your
the
scene
text
is
up
like
on the
Peter
screen as they're
Parker
typing.
like sitting alone texting, and you just see like you hear the whoop, and it puts a little like bubble,
Right, yeah.
like overlay sort of
Yeah.
thing. That's a really like newish
Yeah.
thing. I mean, well, of course, 'cause, like texting is pretty newish, but like every movie does that now. That's just an
Weirdly,
offshoot.
I remember watching movies like back in 2005 that did that kind of thing. They just didn't do it quite as well, but it was like for teeny boppy movies type
Right.
things where they put, and it used to drive me nuts. It like took me out of the movie, but now they've like done such a good job at doing that.
It still takes me out of the movie because you're showing me a phone screen.
Yeah, it doesn't quite take me out of the movie as much as it used to. It's a lot more subtle.
It's been I kind of
now.
like the way they're doing it now, where you show the messages on the screen and then you can see the messages and still watch the actor act it out. Because previously
Right.
the way of doing it was just showing the phone, which like the insert of the phone screen basically.
Right, right.
Well, even before that, it was like the email would come and the character would read the email out loud.
Right. Yeah.
It
Right.
was emails before.
That's actually always been sort of like an interesting thing of seeing how people deal with that in stories, because there's lots of different ways you can do it.
I think about the newest Spider-Man movie. Ian said it best, which is in the alleyway where he puts his backpack for the first time.
Right. Yeah.
You actually have something to look at no matter what you're staring at in that shot, and that's actually consistent throughout that movie. They did a great job at not just having Spider-Man being the thing to look at. In every single shot in that movie, you can stare at something else, and it's worth looking at. Like, if you can actually stare at dumpsters in an alleyway and think that the shot composition is really great, then, well, I mean, that's really impressive.
Yeah.
And he's right. Like, I actually know where every single dumpster and trash piece and, like, thing on the wall of that alleyway looks like from, like, a 30-second shot just because of how well they put it together.
Yeah.
Like, even the inside of the warehouse, I also know exactly what that warehouse looks like. They made you look at everything, and they did a really great job doing that. So
Yeah, that's a good point. I can remember the actual sets from that movie really well.
yeah,
Another
Them-
big thing, right, about this first Spider-Man. I just had to pull this up to like show.
Yeah.
This is the scene. Everybody knows the scene.
Oh right, the upside down kiss
Upside
scene.
down kiss scene in the rain at
great-
night in the dark. It's like lit.
Right.
It's
That is
very
at night.
well.
Yeah, that is at night
It-
and raining.
It is at night raining in a dark alley where
And it's
she's
orange.
just been
They're
mugged.
orange.
And they are orange. They're definitely orange. And that's like, I don't know, like that just like, that highlights a lot of like the color palette that he likes to use.
Yeah.
Like that orange like is like everywhere. And it's like the weirdest thing, but it feels very comic book like.
yeah.
And even his actors that he gets just go over the top. They're very expressive. Like
Yeah, that's a
you
good point.
can say
Except for
anything you
Kirsten
want.
Well, except for Kirsten Dunst, yeah.
Well, Kristen Dunst is hilarious because she's a struggling actress, being a struggling actress.
But yeah, it's
a hard
also it's
life.
not just colors, which is also a good point. Like there's lots of different ways. It's kind of what I wanted to get into with this one is like all the different ways you can represent sort of like the feel of the original thing using different like physical elements.
Even Kristen Dunst, her hair is like unreally red.
No, I agree. I was just thinking about that.
Yeah.
Well, and there's certain things you can do, like kind of easing that way from color. We've talked about before, where before you even get to the point where you're like color correcting or anything, it's about matter of. Well, so Scott Pilgrim's playing right now. Scott Pilgrim is my personal go-to. This is how to make a comic book into a movie example. Have you seen it, Ricky?
Scott Pilgrim?
Yeah.
I own it like twice.
Okay.
I love the movie.
I
I've read
own
the
it
book.
Double
twice.
checking.
That's awesome.
The colors in that one are actually pretty normal, except that every
They're
character
not.
has like one really bright. Well, we were talking about this. You were talking like
Yeah.
how people have like actually kind of muted colors, except for one.
No, that's
They'll have like
true.
one really bright color on them that sort of like identifies them. Like the first evil ex-boyfriend is the one that I'm thinking of.
With
initially.
the striped shirt.
He's pretty much just like gray and tan,
Yeah.
but he has these really bright green stripes going across on his shirt.
They're not green.
They're not green?
Aren't they like maroon?
I thought it was green. I might be confusing
He
it
has
with a
like
different
black hair, and he's got like.
They're a
It's
weird
Matt-
color, but I'm pretty sure it's like
Matthew Patel.
maroon.
I thought it was green stripe. I also, maybe they were in the comic or something, I don't remember. Maybe I'm
Yeah.
also just colorblind, but
Yeah, you are. This is a bad decision.
but like Ramona, right, her hair every single time she shows up is like a new bright color.
And everything else she wears is
And-
like
well,
muted
yeah, and then-
greens, browns,
right.
blacks.
And Scott usually has like some kind of bright t-shirt or
He's got a lot of yellows.
yeah, he does have yellow a lot. The lead singer of the band has really like bright orange hair also, and I think some color on his jacket somewhere.
We talk about he punched the highlights out of her hair.
Right, yeah.
Oh my god.
So it's like it's interesting because you can like highlight different there's different ways to highlight color and stuff. I feel like there's lots of different directions like you can come from with
That
the whole
movie is-
adaptation thing, and that one did a lot of them.
Yeah, that's like aesthetically amazing on literally every
Right.
single thing you could like.
I think by the end of this podcast, we should pick out of the arbitrary selection of options we've brought up, we should select which movie is the best adaptation of its original thing, purely in terms of visuals.
So I might end up picking Wonder Woman.
Okay,
Why?
I'm willing to hear out the
Actually,
argument.
so
It has the Nolan like.
it's not Nolan, it's the other one.
I know, but
Zack Snyder.
And I love everything he's ever made just because of the visuals in it. Like I consistently
it has
apparently
those,
like all of his
it
movies.
has the browns, the grays, the blacks that I don't like
See,
on my bright, colorful superheroes. I like the browns, the grays, the blacks on my dark, brooding superhero one, Batman.
I thought, well, okay, I think I was really curious to see how they were gonna make Wonder Woman into like not modern so much, but a real person with a real costume that makes any sense. And I thought they did a perfect job on her costume. Like, I'm not a huge fan of like muting all of the colors. I think Spider-Man 2, The Amazing Spider-Man, was actually a great example of not muting colors and having it work really well. But I still really enjoyed the way that they did. I mean, it's all in all a fairly dull movie because there's also a lot of like war scenes. It was a pretty dull, uncolorful time, specifically for that movie. But I actually really liked the way they translated Wonder Woman into a visual movie. A lot. I thought her costume was great. Outside of the actress that they got, I think all of the other actual Amazonian-looking women were great. Like, I actually thought they did a really great job with the visuals of that movie. It looked like a video game, actually. I remember saying
Kind of
that.
did in a couple places, but
A lot of
it looked like
The problem
Soul Calibur specifically. Like it looked like more of
Yeah.
the darker, grittier video games.
I wouldn't consider Soul Calibur dark.
Well, that's a good point. That's one of the more colorful
Yeah,
fighting games, I
I'm
guess.
thinking when I think of video games, like you're thinking like Gears of War, Call
Right,
of Duty,
yeah.
all of, like the dark, gritty.
At some point, they did that with video games too.
There's a time and a place for dark, gritty.
Sure.
Dark, gritty
Well,
definitely belongs.
I didn't think Wonder
in
Woman was dark or
places.
gritty.
It was dull.
No,
I think
it's
you were
definitely
saying the right
not.
word.
It's definitely not dark, gritty. It's not Man of Steel, dark, gritty.
Right.
Never saw that, but
Don't worry, you didn't miss anything.
I have the trailer rolling. You can see some of the images from it at least.
for
At
Wonder
some
Woman?
point.
Or
From Man of Steel.
Oh, okay.
I guess the kind like, is it always so we're kind of oversaturated with the dark and grittiness, but it's like some things might work better with it. I guess the question is like, is it always necessary to do the bright, colorful superhero also? Because I know
Not
that's like your
always.
preference, and it's also my preference most of the time. But
But
like I can respect like she is going through World War I, and it was brighter and more colorful when she was like in her island or whatever. Like
Yeah,
that was like
the
color.
beginning
The
part
color
was really
changed
beautiful.
very drastically when she entered London
also,
and like
how
the
are you
real
gonna
world.
give her actual costume and not make her look like McDonald's? Like
Well,
there's
that's
just
the-
no way to do that. Her headband couldn't have been yellow without it looking like McDonald's, and then red, blue, and yellow. Like
That's a big
she would've
question
looked
with
stupid.
like all of them though, and Marvel
Like,
actually does an amazing
Captain
job
America did
specifically of taking like I don't know who Marvel hired to make their costumes, but they do the most incredible job I've ever seen of taking these impossible, ridiculous looking costumes from the comic books and making them completely functional and make total sense
Except
in real
for
life.
Wolverine's actual costume.
And-
that will never happen.
Right, they still
ever.
never managed to do that, but if anybody could, they could because they made like
Yeah.
Ant-Man and Captain America and like all these other people that just have pretty stupid looking costumes, honestly, like on paper, into things that actually look real, like
Yeah.
they could actually exist.
Yeah.
Like Captain America in that movie, like he's got the stupid costume on, but he does what he's supposed to do. He's like
Right.
he is bright, and he is like a very bold and like colorful figure.
Right.
He's that shining beacon of hope that they want him to be. You know,
He's an easier one actually, just because that is his character.
He just needs to be. He can be amongst all the grays and the like darks, the greens and stuff like that, and he just stands out, and that's what you want him to do.
It's interesting because there are actually very specific design elements on all of the Marvel costumes that kind of match, I've noticed. Like, all the skin-tight Marvel costumes have certain, like, stitch lines in the same places and have, like, these shoulder things that I've always noticed, too. Like, Spider-Man and Captain America both have these angles on the shoulders that sort of, like, accentuate the muscle a bit and stuff.
Yeah, the costume design's amazing.
It's just interesting because I know, like, in the comics, the reason superheroes wear spandex is because comic artists didn't want to draw cloth. So they were like, we're going to draw people, we're going to color them yellow, and we're going to say they're wearing some skin-tight thing. And they made it spandex because that kind of makes sense, I guess, because that's what spandex does. Right. But it's like, I know from experience, because I tried to make Rodriguez's costume in real life, turning cartoon stuff into real stuff is actually really hard. Because when I drew Rodriguez's costume, I was not considering how any of this would function if it existed on a physical person.
Right.
So then when I'm having to make an actual version of this for me to wear, I start running into all these problems that never even occurred to me. So I have a lot of respect for the costume designers over at
look at this man.
Marvel.
Look at this Man of Steel. Like, what do you think of when you think of Superman? None of these colors are what you think of.
I didn't know Amy Adams was in that movie.
Yeah, she was.
I love Amy Adams. So
the text is gray.
One of my least favorite things that movies will do with colors is when they do the blue mood scenes. People are blue.
Oh, and
that bothers me so much.
It just looks like there's a blue filter over the whole thing.
Like, the Spider-Man kissing in the rain scene is great because the people are people-colored in the rain.
Right.
Because rain doesn't make you not people-colored. Like, even when it's overcast, people still are colored. So my least favorite thing is a lot of, like, what that trailer just was, which is a filter so strong that the skin tones are even slightly, like, medical-looking. Like when you're in a hospital.
Oh, yeah.
And then there's so they already look like they're under fluorescent lights. And then there's a weird blue filter to almost counter the green filter. And then people are all just weird colored.
Yeah.
It's one of my least favorite things.
Well, I think it's also, like, character design-wise, the one thing DC I don't think does as well is make the characters stand out as much, which I actually think they did better with in Wonder Woman because they kept her outfit very simple. It's kind of the thing of like in Marvel movies, if you see the lineup of characters, you can pick out exactly who every character is immediately, right? It's because they use those really big, bold colors. Mm-hmm. DC goes the route of making it more grungy. It's like detail, like Aquaman's got crap hanging off of him everywhere. I could not draw the Aquaman or the Cyborg costume, I don't think, from memory very well because of just how much is going on. I'm pretty sure I could take most Marvel characters and do a pretty, because they're iconic, right? It's like Captain America, how do you do him? Big A, stripes on the middle part, little wingy things on his head. Like, you do these specific things, and it's like that stands out as that character.
Right.
And sort of like the DC lineup is like kind of like the same shape of dude, all kind of lined up, wearing different versions of like really complicated outfits.
Yeah, DC doesn't always do the best visuals, but I
in
still
the movies
think,
specifically.
I thought Wonder Woman was the best of all of them.
DC movie.
I actually do think Wonder Woman was
DC movie
better because of the simplicity. I don't know if they'll keep up with that or if they'll like give her a more complicated outfit later on or anything, but it's almost I think that worked only because they had so little to work with actually. Like, costume-wise, like, actual, existing fabric-wise.
Sure.
There's not much you can add to that.
Yeah.
Like, Batman's fully covered. You can hang whatever you want off of Batman. Like, you can just add all sorts of stuff on top of him. He was dressed as Iron Man in the latest movie or something. Mm-hmm. I didn't see it. I just saw the trailers as Iron Batman. Like, you can do whatever you want with his costume. Hers is very limited.
Speaking of which, I feel like Cyborg is going to be he's in the new movie just because he's Iron Man.
Yeah, he is, yeah.
They're like, we need an Avengers. I'm like, oh, no, we need an Iron Man. It's like, well, we got Batman. He's Tony Stark. Yeah, but he's not Iron Man. Okay, we'll make an Iron Man, a literal Iron Man.
Yeah.
And then when the face mask pulled over his face in the trailer, I was just like, stop.
Cyborg looks stupid. in the trailer.
I am, yeah, and I don't.
Pretty
and,
unhappy
well, that's
about that.
because I started watching Teen Titans with you too.
Yeah.
And that version of him, again, there's like such a noticeable. It's the hard part of turning cartoons into real life, but I know it can be done because I've seen Marvel do it.
Yeah.
There's a noticeable silhouette on the most recognizable characters.
Yeah.
It's Valve actually talked about this in the commentary for Team Fortress 2. When they were designing the Team Fortress 2 lineup, they actually made sure of 3 specific things. They first made sure that every character had a completely unique silhouette, so that even across the map, you knew exactly who you were looking at.
Right.
You were looking to be like, that's the sniper, or that's the heavy.
Yeah.
And then the next thing was they put color in all the right places, so that even at a distance, all these patches of color coalesced into either red or blue, so you knew what team they were on. And then their entire outfits have lines on them that all point toward their center, so that your vision is immediately drawn toward the weapon they're holding. So
Interesting.
you look at them and you have like 2 seconds, you know, class, team, weapon, you know exactly who you're going up against, and there's never any confusion at all.
Yeah. Well, so I think. Oh man, what was I gonna say? It was. I had.
Did I interrupt?
Yeah.
Sorry.
You interrupted by continuing talking, so you didn't really actually interrupt. It's just my thought was shifted for some reason.
It was about Wonder Woman?
No, it's about Cyborg. That's what it was.
Okay.
So the Cyborg that they made, if they threw in a little bit of what they did with Electro in The Amazing Spider-Man, and they just combined these two ideas,
The blue glowiness.
yeah, then they actually would just create a really cool Cyborg. Like
Yeah.
they just needed those effects and some of that design and just throw it on the one they already have, and like maybe. But I also have no idea how they're going to do that character. Cyborg is not a dark. I mean, he's not like that dark of a gritty character.
Yeah, I think that's kind of what it is. It's like
Neither is Aquaman,
We
though,
talked
so.
last time about how it, like no way of making a movie is wrong. Just have a reason for doing it.
Sure.
And it's sort of like the visual should go into that too. The visual should match the tone of the movie and the theme that you're trying to create. Mm-hmm. So it's like I don't mean to just be taking this entire podcast to be like, here's what we like and this is correct and everything else is stupid.
Right.
It's more just like what you're saying. Like Cyborg is a specific kind of character, and making him look like a Michael Bay Transformer kind of implies different characteristics than is normally associated with him.
Yeah.
Isn't like a big rule of like animated movies, like stuff like that? Like the rule is like you can do whatever you want, you can make anything in the animated, but you just have to know why.
Right. Well, that's how
It's
it should be. That is actually the rule with any storytelling at all.
Right.
Animations do actually take that to heart a lot more, I've found, than live
It's
action
like,
films do.
Why is this character?
I think it's because of how much time you have to spend on it. It's like we have to draw this character over and over and over again. Let's decide how he's going to look and make sure we know exactly why we're doing that.
Yeah.
Right, but it's like beyond that. It's even like
Vendetta, I think.
yeah, we've read that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is. Okay.
Also a comic book movie. Have not actually seen it through the trailer in here.
It is a comic book movie?
Yeah.
Oh,
V
wow.
Vendetta is another. Is it Frank Miller? Did he do that one and along with 300 and Watchmen, or is that a different person? Do none of us know?
I can't
I
tell.
apologize to everybody listening if I said the wrong artist, but
V for Vendetta is amazing.
You know, it's another really good comic book movie that looks very good, but actually, like the movie is actually awful,
But
but it does look very good.
which one?
It's I'm gonna mess this up now, because there's two and they came out at the same time, and they're both very similar in concept and very similar in design. Aeon Flux,
oh yeah, Aeon Flux.
but the other one is Ultraviolet. But
I don't know what Ultraviolet is.
Which one was Aeon Flux? I
Aeon
know
Flux
that name.
is Charlie's. Because I've told you about it, and I really want you to watch it.
it's like running through
right.
like all those like
She has got it's a dystopian society. This Charlize Theron plays action hero Charlize
Right.
Theron.
Yeah, you showed
know?
me the trailer for this. I remember.
Yeah.
The one with the blades of grass.
yes,
That's
the blades
like
of grass.
that's one of the most memorable parts of that movie.
She's a friend who has feet for hands also.
I freaking love that movie. It's like a weird. There's some sort of like inner society thing that they have to breach or something like that. I love the way that movie looks, but to be
The movie's
fair,
awful, but it does look very good.
it looks amazing. I watched it when I was a kid.
The trailer looked really 90s. I didn't actually see the movie. You showed me the trailer and it looked 90s colorful, which is like slightly bloomy. Usually is what that is.
It is slightly bloomy, but I love bloom. You've seen my photography.
That's true.
Bloom is like my favorite thing. I'm just like
You
pump
would love
up
Half-Life.
all the saturation and bloom it out, and then it's fine. 'cause then
Half-Life.
you're
Half-Life 2 is Gray Bloom, and it'd be really interesting for you to play that and just see what you think about its color palette. It's a really weird color palette.
I really, really like Bloom. And it's interesting because I don't like high saturation, I don't like high contrast, and I hate grit.
Yeah.
So once you bump up saturation and contrast and then bloom it out, I'm fine with it. I think that looks best.
So
I also love visuals on 300.
Yeah,
we were talking
Bloom
about
300 is great.
Frank Miller, or not Frank Miller, sorry.
Once again, there's
Frank
a
Miller's
time.
good.
There's a time for like that, like
Zack Snyder. He doesn't do Superman well, but he does 300
Snyder.
great.
I love
because
all
that's
of
his
it's-
style.
Because this is where these colors belong.
Right.
It's where this style belongs.
That's
like,
his visual style.
like
matched
one
that
accented
book.
color and a bunch of just like muted darker colors.
Now, Zack Snyder looks like a photographer gone into like videography. Like
Does kind
every single shot he has, I'm like, yes, yes, they're all amazing. And then it's just a continuation of a beautiful shot. I'm not gonna like, his colors aren't they're blue.
Oh,
they're
okay,
freaking
yes.
blue. Freaking hate that. But I love like every single visual Zack Snyder has ever done. Is that Cersei? What?
Well, it's like this is the Bronze movie, right? That's what this one is known for. It is the movie that is bronze the entire way through.
This wasn't the Half Naked Men movie.
I usually, I mean, in regards to color, that's not really the topic of the podcast, but I suppose it is also that.
But I haven't seen that before. And I
No.
totally loved seeing it.
Right, and it was
I thought
really
it was
cool,
great.
and that's kind of what it's like. It's
I was a little confused there for a second when you were like, I haven't seen that before, and I was like, Half Naked Men the movie, or
I mean, yeah.
yeah. I
because
mean,
he did
I
this
have
one.
seen that.
He did Watchmen, which I also think looked good. There are mixed opinions on how that movie actually turned out, but it looked good, and it like those fit his style because the original book was really heavy, like black ink stuff. It's Frank Miller comics specifically have a certain look to them that don't look like Superman. They look like these really, really high contrast drawings. Like the blacks in those books, those are black.
For which
Like,
one?
it's
Sorry.
In like actual the comic of 300 and
Oh, okay.
in Watchmen and V for Vendetta.
Gotcha.
It is like dark black and white contrast ink.
Especially when it like slow motions a lot in the movie 300, right? What it almost makes it look like, right, is it looks like paintings that are moving.
Yeah.
Is what
Yeah.
it looks
Yeah,
like.
it does.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
like, in like the best way possible too, you know.
So what would your pick be if you had
300
to
is
off the top of
actually
your
my new
head?
favorite.
Is that the one that you're going for?
Yeah, it is.
What would your pick be for like best adaptation of its original?
Like how close it is to what it like actually looked like in the
Yeah,
Or-
not just
or
how
your
close,
favorite
but yeah, or just
interpretation.
your favorite interpretation. Because there are versions. There was a thing people did briefly for comic book movies, or things people tried to do, where they actually would. I've seen things with comic panel frames on them. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
I can't think
the
of any
Hulk-
examples. Did the Hulk do it?
The 2003 Hulk or 2004 Hulk. Whatever.
Yeah.
The one that's just called Hulk.
Yeah. Did they do the comic panel thing?
They do like oh my god, they're okay. The Hulk has like the worst transitions in any movie ever.
Oh god,
made.
did they like zoom out of the comic page?
They
and back
zoom
into
out
it?
of the
Oh,
comic
God.
page and back into
Oh,
the
God.
comic page.
Yeah, that is so people did that for a while because it was like they just didn't know how to translate the feeling of watching or of reading a comic to watching a movie, which is actually the reason that I like Scott Pilgrim so much, and I'll get to that, but I'm curious to hear what is your favorites. What would be your go-to example of like a good adaptation of
Of like
its original thing
some sort of like
of a
visual
comic?
novel.
I
or-
would say of a video game if they were good video game movies.
There aren't.
But there are not.
I love the way that looks too.
Yeah, the Watchmen turned out really, really good looking, I
I
think.
think, yeah, I
'Cause it
definitely.
looks like
is
the
this Zack
comic book.
Snyder too?
This is also Zack Snyder.
Okay, Zack Snyder is easily my favorite visual.
Honestly, it's a tough one for me. I want to say Raimi Spider-Man, but another one that I really think, and it hasn't come up yet, is really good with like the comic book look and feel.
Yeah.
Elektra, knew it.
No, Kick-Ass.
Okay.
Oh, kick-ass!
Like in the scenes when he like that one like also like it transitions very well because like it has like
Those
like the like
colors.
real world scenes and those look just like real real life scenes, but then when he is kick-ass and they start like especially as the adventures start escalating, it just becomes more and more comic book and like the colors become more ridiculous, the weapons become giant and huge, the violence of course just spirals out of hand, the blood splats, the everything like that. Like especially I'm thinking of like Kick-Ass 2. I know a lot of people don't. A lot of people don't talk about Kick-Ass 2,
I don't think I remember Kick-Ass 2.
but like,
Oh yeah, I do. I like that one actually.
Yeah.
I love both of those movies.
yeah, no, it definitely. It does like a unique thing where it does both. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It does like the normal like, these are just people living in a world. There's nothing comic book about it.
Right.
And then it transitions into like, this
Comic book.
looks like a comic book now.
They
That's
gave him
neat.
like a full green outfit, and then
Yeah.
the other chick has got a full purple outfit. They did a great job on the visuals of that
And then
movie.
the red mist, red and black
Yeah.
outfit, and you got even like the camo-ish outfit from Jim Carrey in the second one,
Yeah,
and then you have the Batman outfit from
they're all
Nick
great
Cage.
actually. I didn't realize how underrated Kick-Ass was in terms of visual superhero-esque movies. Just because no one's talking about it, but
Yeah.
Like, cause
Kick-Ass
like,
is great.
like
Well,
in
have
the
you
beginning,
read the comics of Kick-Ass at all? Like, is that something that you've like? Do you
I
have like
have,
a
the
comparison
first
of
one,
how
right?
it looks to the original?
Right. No, in the first one. And the thing is, like, it looks like a movie, and even up to the point where, like, he's just fighting normal people. When he's just fighting normal people in the costume suit, like, it just looks like that's some, like, nerd in a suit fighting, like, regular people or whatever, right? But then when the comic book heroes and villains begin fighting each other,
yeah,
it switches into, like,
yeah, it does.
completely, like, straight from the comic book sort of look.
I'm not sure that it has to look like a comic book to be like worth it.
Right, for
Or to
sure.
be a good adaptation.
Right.
I
But,
think
like-
it has to look like the source material is the kind of the main thing, which is why I think.
What do you mean? What do you mean it has to look like the source material?
Well, if we're talking about like a good adaptation, you want it to evoke the same feeling that the original thing did, right? Like Zack Snyder,
Sure.
the ones that you're pointing at that Zack Snyder did, those are really good because if you look at a screenshot of the Watchmen movie, that looks like the Watchmen comics.
Right, he definitely captured the essence of it. I see what you're saying.
Right. And I think that's why I think there's a disconnect with so many people on DC stuff.
Yeah.
Because whether it's him or whether it's somebody else doing it, you don't really get that same feeling of like
Yeah.
I'm looking at a panel from
Right.
a Superman comic or something.
That's like nobody's Superman.
right, yeah.
Nobody wanted
it is a
that
new,
Superman.
It's a new version, and I think that's actually a different conversation of like whether or not that works like
Yeah.
as its own thing, like taking an adaptation or taking artistic liberties on like an existing property, sort of.
Yeah.
But like as far as adaptation goes, it's like that's why like he specifically is really well suited to those other movies that he did because like 300 he just shot the comic panels basically and he made them look fantastic. Like they
Yeah.
they evoke the exact same feeling.
Yeah.
And it sounds like Kick-Ass probably does a similar thing, where
Right.
it actually gives you the feeling of
Have you
Eventually.
not
the comic.
have you not seen Kick-Ass?
I haven't actually. I had that
Oh
recommended
my
to me a lot when I
God.
was making the guards themselves,
Oh.
but never got around to watching it.
Wow.
I don't believe that. That's ridiculous. I can't believe you've not seen that.
Really?
I haven't seen it.
It's it's one of those movies that really bothered a lot of people,
Yeah, I've heard people talk
but
about
not
parts
because
of it
it
that
was
bother
a bad
them.
movie. It just it kind of just like struck people wrong.
Right, I heard
certain
some people
parts of
talk
it.
about like the little girl just like murdering people and it being played for laughs, that kind of thing.
So
But,
good.
like that's I don't know. Like,
Like I
it's
think I
sort of
might find issue with that, but I will watch it.
No, you won't. I don't
To-
think you will actually. I don't think you will with the way that they do it.
Yeah.
Like it's that movie.
especially
is
the second
so
one. It just
good.
like is ultra violent.
So it looks like sorry, just to completely change the topic here,
That's
but
all right,
I'm
we're not
looking at
super
I'm looking at
consistent.
Assassin's Creed trailer playing right now, which I also didn't see and have no intention of seeing.
We didn't time this.
But I'm watching on the
Oh, okay.
recorder. Every time it cuts to the freaking science lab scenes, everything turns blue again, like what you were talking about.
Everything
But
turns
like
blue.
the colors I think of when I think of Assassin's Creed, the only color I can think of is whites.
Yeah, exactly,
Yeah.
because it's like the animus, the whole
whites
But
weird,
with
like,
that's-
bright reds.
Yeah, and
Yeah,
that's
that's true.
it's so weird that people can't do white well because what they ended up doing is doing like a fluorescent green blue thing, and that's how they make things look sterile or white or clean, which is weird because I even think the original Spider-Man's whites were some of the best whites you could do in a movie.
Yeah.
Because they just look like white. They just left it like you don't have to touch it. It's
Yeah.
okay if things just almost look like real life for the sake of lacking all of the other colors.
Right.
Like that's okay.
Technically, white is containing all of the other colors.
Well, yeah, but not like if you're in a white room and you
Yeah.
light a blue
I'm
light.
being obnoxious. That's all. I'm sorry.
Well, go away. The door's that way. Get out.
That is a good point, though. Like, not a lot of people do like the white just with some color, and that looks really good.
Right.
And actually, the immediate thing that comes to mind is Mirror's Edge, the video game.
Never played it.
It is a parkour game.
Oh.
It is
lot of
all
whites.
white. Like the
Whites.
whole, you're out in the city. Like you're in all these different locations. It's entirely white with like
Whites
occasional
and-
like red.
Whites and grays, and
And-
everything that's red is your path.
Right, yeah. So it's like you
Right.
run toward the red parts, and it's like really. And I think games actually are another good example. It's almost like, it's like in movies, color I think comes later. In the production process.
Yeah.
And I'm saying this as completely as a culprit of this because I do not consider color until the very last step for the most part.
Like
And I think
how my shirt looked exactly the same color as the necklace.
right, yeah. I don't even think about it, and I think people I have some excuses for that. They're not good excuses, but I can at least throw out like eyeball disabilities. But other people, like professional filmmakers, I almost think sometimes don't consider the color as much as video games and animators and comic artists might, because that plays a much bigger role almost in what they're making. Because like Mirror's Edge works because of the color, obviously, right? And like when you're doing an animation, you're designing every little speck of that image from scratch. So all these different things are set up. Like I remember seeing in Disney movies, I saw a behind the scenes thing in a Disney movie where they were talking about all the different backgrounds they've used for the movies. Have something that they were calling the pool of light or something, where the whole background would be actually darkened except for this area that was lit up, which is where the action was happening. And they very, very specifically like draw the scene to look to point inward toward the action. Even though there's a lot of stuff going on around you, they would like use lighting and like all these little like tweaks that I guess that I don't personally think about when making movies quite as much, and that I think kind of go by the wayside a bit more.
There is a perfect example of the white thing, which is actually, we have the seasons of Community, and which one had the extended clip ones?
Oh yeah, what episode was
Season
that? It
2
was
or
the
something.
Valentine's Day episode, I think.
So in the I guess the ones you can buy,
The DVDs.
they
yeah.
show you unedited clips that they didn't put into the show.
Oh,
So
yeah.
they're just like, it's just what they filmed, and it's grain. So they actually color correct the original footage to look most like real life. And by doing that, it comes across as absolutely no color whatsoever, like implied in the shot, which makes it white. That is a white balanced shot. And that's so totally allowed, but no one does it in movies. They
Yeah,
do it
that's
for
true.
Community, which makes sense. It's like a
I guess
comedy.
because it's supposed to feel like real, right?
But
It's
you
supposed to feel
can-
like a
you-
real world, like
you can use that. They don't do it in, I assume they don't do it in like comic book superhero movies stuff because of all the feelings you can portray with colors.
yeah,
So they just kind of don't
Or
even.
lack of colors.
Yeah, right. they'll imply a feeling with colors because you can.
yeah.
But it's also okay for things to just, look like real life.
Right.
So what's your argument for Scott Pilgrim?
So my thing for Scott Pilgrim is when I'm sitting, I read the books also, and they also shot for shot remade a lot of Scott Pilgrim, which I thought was really cool. Like you can go look at the panel in the book of like him in front of his showing off his old house,
Right.
and the artist drew that house off of an existing house. So for the movie, they went and shot at that house. So
Right.
the shot of Michael Cera and whoever plays Knives, I don't know her name,
I don't either.
are standing in front of the house. If you compare that side by side to the comic panel, it's actually just the same shot, which is really cool.
Yeah, I like that.
But the main thing for me is when you're sitting there reading a comic, there's a distinct feel of reading a comic book. When people are writing the comics, they draw the panels to lead your eye from each one to the next one, so that just to enhance the experience of reading the comic. It's just part of the art.
Right.
You're sort of like leading them into each next thing.
Yeah.
And the transitions in Scott Pilgrim match that feeling so well to me that it's the closest I've ever felt watching a movie to being like I'm seeing a visual moving version of a comic book. Because it'll
Yeah.
have these things where it's like the one scene, like all the lights go out and then the door opens in the darkness and then he flips the light on and is in a different location. Or like it's not just swish pans, it's not zooming out of the comic page and zooming back into another panel. It's like it's physical transitions using what you can create with film that give the same sense of that fluidity, like being able to just like just skimming your eyes over a page, basically. And
Really interesting.
I thought was really cool. The first time I watched that movie, when I walked away, one of the main things on my mind was the transitions from the movie, because I had never noticed a film's transitions before.
Pacing of that movie.
And the pacing, right? I mean, it was good for like. There's lots and lots to say, like positive things to say about it. That was just in regards to the topic at hand. That was one of the main things that I noticed, was that it actually really felt like a visual, comics are visual, like a film version of a comic.
Yeah, I agree. No, and that's hard because you can't really. So what I can say is I can't argue against you at all, because you're totally right. But I also think 300 and Kick-Ass are great contenders for from film adaptations of original comic books. Because Kick-Ass, it sucks because you haven't seen it, but I would argue that it's better at all of the things that you were just talking about. Maybe not transitions. I don't remember the transitions in Kick-Ass, but nothing. I remember watching that and being like, this is just a comic book.
Yeah.
Like comic book creators made this. Comic book fans made this. Like costumes are comic book people. Like it really screams all of those things.
I'm staking my Scott Pilgrim on the transition, because that's the one thing that I have with it that I don't think the other movies replicate as well.
Its transitions are good, yeah.
Because there are lots of other things that it does, but I do think like the other films that you're bringing up also do some of those things really well too. Because there are a lot of examples of using, as we have spent half the show talking about colors. Obviously, that's something that some people do really well. Like there are lots of good examples and bad examples of color. Are there what else? So color aside,
I have a lot. So speaking of
Color
transitions,
aside.
I have a lot I don't like about the Avengers movies. But one thing I do like is when they transition in the action scenes from character to character, and they camera pan through the action, and you naturally land following the action on another character.
Yeah.
So you have a bunch, because there's a ton going on in both Avengers movies.
right?
And so it's like, well, you have this scene with like Black Widow and Hulk, and that scene ends with Hulk crushing a thing, and then you follow that until he passes up with Thor crushing more
Instead
things.
of just cutting, you
and then
move on to the next guy.
and then he lands and is talking to Hawkeye. And now we have the next scene, right? And then Hawkeye then shoots, and then there's Quicksilver there, and now Quicksilver and Hawkeye are discussing things, and that sort of transitioning without cutting almost. And they definitely do cut to the different camera angles, but that pan with the action to transition to the next set of characters in the scene, that really works in the Avengers movies.
Yeah, you're right. They do that really well.
That was a great point. I think other things to really think about in terms of visuals that aren't color are actual, it would be casting, it would be costumes, it would be...
Casting is a good point. I wasn't even thinking about that.
Casting's a big one, because when you literally read comic books growing up, you go, I want this person. This is exactly who I think this person is in real life.
That's true.
And then they have to cast that person.
There's
and
always
they
a whole
have to
thing where, yeah.
Because Wonder Woman was killed. She was killed for me. She was freaking dead now.
Yeah. Yeah, okay. Yeah, that's a good point.
That,
Like
I
Wonder
think
Woman
casting's
would've
a really big deal because, it's a literal, actual visual interpretation of a two-dimensional drawing character.
That's actually an excellent point. I wasn't even thinking about casting in terms of this, but that is actually a really big part of that.
Tobey Maguire
Especially
does
for
look a
superheroes.
lot like the old Spider-Man comic.
He does, actually.
Peter Parker.
Yeah.
And his acting and delivery is not the best, but his facial expressions are over-exaggerated and big.
Yeah.
Well,
And that is what they needed to be, because that's what they are in the old comics,
And
Yeah,
if we're
I
talking
agree.
about on-point casting, we may as well just jump straight to the best casting of any comic book character of all time, which was J. Jonah Jameson casting J.K. Simmons
What are you talking about?
in the original Spider-Man movies.
The
J.K.
Raimi
Simmons
Spider-Mans.
as J. Jonah Jameson.
Oh, I see. That's the, who
The
is it?
newspaper guy.
It isn't, okay,
Yeah.
that's...
If you're talking about the
Sure. I didn't read those comic books.
if
But he was great.
Have you ever seen drawings of the character?
No.
I'll have to show them to you after the podcast because he looks literally identical
Exactly.
down to every detail.
See,
it is amazing.
I think that used to be a much more important thing
Yeah.
during the original desire to make superhero movies. People were
I agree.
we have to get the right person.
Because you wanted
That's
to bring
the
that
thing.
character onto the screen, right?
Yeah,
You didn't want
exactly.
an interpretation of them. You wanted
Like
them.
William Dafoe.
Well, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, he did a great job.
Willem Dafoe. Like, the thing is, like, Raimi cast a bunch of people who could make big facial expressions and over-exaggerated movements.
Exactly.
And be bigger than the panels, bigger than the screen.
Yeah.
That's what he did.
Like
That Aunt May is, like, the most expressive old woman I've ever seen in my life.
Yeah.
Even when they're, like, doing, like a personal, like, really intense conversation between two people, and she's, like, talking really quietly, her face does, like, all these different things that like, my face never does when
Right.
I'm having, like, personal conversations with people.
And then James Franco is in there, and he has a lot of facial time,
Yeah,
Yeah.
James Franco.
his
yeah.
acting's actually good, and then he has to star
Right.
with the Mary Jane, and she does not do good.
Well, and
Right.
that was like one of the biggest complaints about the Amazing Spider-Man movies, right? Is that nobody really bought Andrew Garfield as Peter Parker because he didn't feel like the same character they were used to from the other iteration of the comics. It didn't bother me as much, but I know that it bothered other people
He
a lot.
mumbles, and he
does mumble.
Why is mumbling bad? I don't
Huh?
understand. Peter Parker seems like exactly the type of person that would mumble.
And well, I agree, and I think that's actually
But I don't
part
ever
of the difference,
think-
though, between like having an interpretation of that character
What you
rather
think he'd
than
be
just
like versus
putting
what
that
he
character for face value on the screen
Matthew
immediately.
Patel has orange and brown stripes,
Oh,
or
okay.
blue, black.
Well, then my eyes are just broken. Never
No,
mind.
it is maroon. He's maroon.
But yeah, I think that's kind of the problem people have with some of the casting like that.
Yeah.
That's why
Like
.
the implications of that character. That makes sense.
Yeah, well, and it's why it's the thing that horrible people go to when they're like, "Why are you making this character black? He's not black in the comics, right?" Like that's
I
the so there are ways. This isn't even necessarily a good argument for character portrayal.
Yeah.
It's just kind of it's a common one, and it's kind of an understandable
But,
one.
I
And
mean,
it's-
that scene in Amazing Spider-Man 1 where he's like, come on, man, give Meg his camera. He's like, what'd you say?
now, see, I really loved that version of Peter Parker, but it was not a comic book version of Peter Parker. It was a new version,
Sure.
and so I totally get why people didn't like it. And I think that's
But, like, Tobey Maguire, like, he, like, lowers his head at the bully. He's like, yes, yeah, he agrees,
Right.
entirely,
He just looks like the comic book character, and
Yeah.
I think Marvel actually, a lot of the Marvel Cinematic Universe has done generally a really good job of casting. I can't really think of any like bad examples.
I don't
of their
know. I don't know
casting.
what Tony Stark looked like.
He looked like
I don't know what he looked like.
he looked like Robert Downey Jr. I went back. I have a box in my closet of old comic books that my dad owned. And when that first movie came out, I went and picked out one of the Iron Man comics, and I opened it up, and there was a picture of Robert Downey Jr. drawn in that book. It was the same freaking face. It was actually almost the same thing as J. Jonah Jameson.
Yeah.
He was a perfect casting for that.
And then they've even got Doctor Strange. He
Dark,
did an
that was
amazing
fantastic.
job with
Yeah, Marvel has actually done a really good job with casting and costume design.
And they did the second best casting of any superhero.
the
Vin Diesel
what? Oh,
as Groot.
that. Right.
looks just the same.
Well, I was actually thinking. I think one of the
Who's
So-
a bad one?
well, so I was thinking immediately Black
It's
Widow.
Green Lantern.
Well, no,
Right.
Marvel. Who's the worst? Because
Oh.
all of Marvels are good. So who's the worst casting option in Marvel as far as how they look in the comics? Do you think?
Okay, so
Ant-Man.
who?
What does Ant-Man look like in the comics?
Isn't it Hank Pym?
He is. There is a version where it's the character. It's like Hank Pym, and then it's Scott Lang later, which is who Paul Rudd is playing. And I don't know how he looks actually. I know nothing about Ant-Man from the comic books.
I don't think Elizabeth Olsen as Scarlet Witch makes a lot of sense, but I don't actually like. I know what she physically looks like in the comic books.
Yeah.
But I have no idea what her personality is supposed to be like. She reminds me of Meredith Grey from Grey's Anatomy as like a Marvel character.
That's probably correct, though. The two
She's
X-Men
kinda
that they brought in there probably
boring.
don't look very much like their original drawings, right?
No, they actually look
Because-
entirely well.
Because they
Quicksilver-
can't, because they'd be infringing on Sony's rights.
Well, Scarlet Witch has she doesn't wear anything.
Oh.
And she has
she's a female in the comic, that makes sense.
She also has like a big head thing, like a big head helmety type thing, headband,
Oh,
like very, like Wonder Woman's, but on her head,
yeah.
sort of thing, if I'm remembering correctly. And in this one, they just gave her like a long coat or something like that, like she's completely
Right.
covered head to toe, and she's all like boring and dark and
She
twisty
looks
and
cool.
stuff.
Like those are my
She looks
only
fine.
that's how I know those characters because
But in terms of casting,
But
Elizabeth
yeah.
Olsen as Scarlet Witch, I was like, well, I don't know much about Scarlet Witch, but this is slightly underwhelming as
Yeah.
a character because, like, we have a female Avenger that isn't the Black Widow because that went so well.
Right.
And it was still kind of like, oh.
Black
more-
Widow looks on point.
Yeah, no, I think Scarlett Johansson as Scarlett Johansson in a black bodysuit
Right.
is great casting for that character. It's just that's also Scarlett Johansson in every other, like in Lucy and in like just
It's probably
Yeah.
Topher Grace.
Oh God,
It's
Topher.
probably Topher Grace.
I don't know if we can count that as a Marvel.
Let's
That was before
be
they actually started
honest.
taking over. But yes, you're correct. In a movie on a Marvel
And of
property,
course, I will then argue it's Andrew Garfield.
I will go with Topher Grace. That's probably the worst. Topher Grace is who they cast as Venom in the Spider-Man movie as Eddie
Right.
Brock. I guess that's probably one of the worst ones, yeah. Because even like I was trying to think of some of their really early ones, but I think actually the casting on like the original Daredevil and Punisher and those things still didn't
Ben Affleck?
quite get as
I
bad.
was about to say Ben Affleck's Batman, but we're not.
Ben
still in
Affleck
Marvel.
as Daredevil still not as bad as Topher Grace as Venom.
yeah. I didn't think Ben Affleck was a bad Daredevil.
I think he's a bad Batman.
Well, he plays a chin in both situations, so I'm not really sure it's fair to say he's like a bad as an adaptation version of that character.
Yeah.
Like they're actually very, very similar
He
roles.
plays a chin.
That is. That's all you see of him. Like
You're
that's
right.
the whole thing. Also,
Not in the
actually,
original
I would say
Daredevil.
Ben Affleck as Bruce Wayne is perfect. When I first saw him in a trailer, I was like, that is exactly how I personally picture Bruce Wayne all the time. Like he looks exactly like the kind of middle-aged, like rich dude, like that I'm picturing, like in my head. I
Yeah.
don't know how much about. Again, Batman is a chin, so it's not that hard to play Batman.
Also,
but
side tangent about just like how like often origin stories get like reshown and reshown and reshown and reshown, right?
yeah.
Tell me about what is the thing that you think of the most with Batman's parents dying?
Robert shoots him, they die, and he's like,
No,
they're in
like,
an alleyway.
The scene, like what, like, no, like the pearls
The pearls.
Oh.
falling on the ground or whatever.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah, I think I have actually
Yeah.
seen some like comic
that's
panels
in
of
like
that.
that's in like every like.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that might be from Batman Begins or something. I don't know where I'm getting the image from, but I do have that image in my head.
Right.
I haven't, yeah.
So yeah.
Like them lying dead, pearls all over the ground. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So, what else?
Well, so composition would be kind of the other thing. That's a little tricky because literally you could break down every single scene of every single movie
Yeah.
that might have like a good composition shot. I mean, I don't know. I mean, if we're talking about visuals of movie and like
Scott Pilgrim is the video game movie. It is the video game.
That's true, that one
It's
does
the
kind of-
pop
Yeah.
culture movie. Like
it's a movie
is.
about a comic book about video games,
Yeah.
and does all of those layers really well.
yeah, I mean, Scott Pilgrim is easily like just one of the best movies ever made, though. So
Which is
I mean,
weird, like
by my
because it
standards.
shouldn't have worked. It's like one of those movies where it's
a
just
lot of people don't think so.
it's
Gwen
it didn't
Stacy
do
from
very
Amazing
well.
Spider-Man. Her name is Emma
Emma Stone.
Stone. Okay.
Yeah.
She's only cast. Like she's fine as an actress. I feel like she gets
But she was
cast
great
a
at
lot.
Gwen Stacy. Like she.
I feel like she just gets cast a lot because her eyes are too big. Her eyes are way.
She does have
too
cartoon
big.
eyes.
Emma Stone's not my favorite person, but Gwen Stacy was my favorite. Like, one of my favorite just
Yeah,
women, just women as a woman.
We
on
talked about that
screen.
last time. Actually, she was actually a really great like female side character in a superhero movie compared to other ones.
Wait. She was a really great female side character in a superhero movie.
Right, yeah.
That sentence just in itself is.
It's a
doesn't
problematic
make any
sentence.
No,
but it's,
I actually think it's a
It's
great
definitely
sentence.
Hit Girl.
well, okay, I haven't seen the
No,
movie.
Hit
again,
Girl
so-
is her own superhero.
Yeah.
Right.
She is the superhero.
Yeah.
In Kick-Ass.
I was thinking
No,
Gwen
I'm
Stacy
saying
like
it's-
as because every superhero movie featuring a male superhero, which is every superhero movie, has like the girlfriend character. I think Gwen Stacy was definitely the best of the girlfriend characters. We also we talked about that last time.
Not
so
even
we
that.
shouldn't go too far into the.
Not even
again,
that
I
though.
think.
It's really easy to be a cool, fun side character. Ned from the newest Spider-Man.
Well,
right?
yeah.
Like, but
We say that's easy, but we're specifically impressed by Ned because of how good of a version of that
okay,
character
Ned,
he was.
Foggy, all of the other characters that are amazing
Oh,
side
Some people would
characters.
George.
argue about Foggy.
What?
Yeah, there are people who don't like Foggy.
Foggy.
What?
Foggy has a pretty vocal
Foggy. Hold on.
negative.
Refresh.
Oh,
Foggy from Daredevil, from the
Oh,
Daredevil
yeah.
series on Netflix.
Yeah.
People dislike Foggy because the argument against Foggy is that his entire role is telling Daredevil not to Daredevil.
Yeah, yeah. That.
Who is the
yes.
guy in The Flash? You know the one, the side character from The Flash, who is
I haven't watched The Flash. I've
the-
only
the
heard
long-
Reed
the long
complain
black
about
hair,
The Flash.
and
I have
he's
no idea.
always like eating something.
No idea who this is.
I've only had Reed complain about how bad The Flash is. So
It's
I don't.
not bad. It's really good.
I'm just saying, she was a great not superhero, not main character, also side character, and she was
She
one
was a
of the
good character.
best just characters
Right,
to ever
yeah.
exist.
He
Like,
was actually just a great character.
Now, because we're just watching various Scott Pilgrim things that are just on loop at this point.
yeah.
Like Knives is like one of the better characters too. Like she's a pretty good character.
Yeah, they did a they
For like a
actually
character
just-
with like very little screen time, all of her screen time is great.
Yeah,
I mean,
Then again, that's the whole
love
movie,
struck
right?
petty teenager, but yeah, she did a great job doing that character, I think. Which is, there's something to be said for that, because she's still memorable, like
Yeah.
she is. But
She also makes a joke about her own last name, which is funny.
does she?
Yeah, when she dives in, she's like, "It's time to chow down."
Right.
Her name is Knives.
Not sure that's a plus.
Huh?
I said not sure that's a plus.
Yeah, it's.
I'm
pretty
actually not
much
sure if
plus.
that's original author or there's a lot of like weird Asian stereotype things in Scott Pilgrim, but the original author of the book was Chinese Canadian, I think.
Oh.
So he was like, I guess he gets a pass.
Kinda
'cause
played
he's
into them.
Chinese, yeah.
Yeah, okay. I can kind of see that, I guess. Hadn't really thought about it. It is just Scott Pilgrim on.
Yeah, I
Like-
guess this one video I picked was like way longer than I thought it was. So
Yeah,
are there?
That looked orange.
Has anybody seen any? Do we have any example of video game movies at all?
I mean,
that
I've
we
seen
can
a
bring
lot
up?
of video game movies.
Have you? Because I haven't seen many of them. Are there any that kind of like get the tone of the video game across that you can think of, or have just no movies accomplished it yet?
No, like they're never like anything about the video game, like at all. Like
Well,
the Mario one.
Oh
the
god, the Mario one.
Wait, what?
Oh jeez.
What?
You don't know about the
Mario
Mario Brothers
Brothers
movie
No.
that came out in the 90s?
No.
It's 80s, isn't it? It's an 80s movie.
I thought it was
There's no way
90s.
it's an
I don't
90s
remember.
movie.
It was the Super Mario Brothers the movie, and it was.
It has nothing to do with.
It is
Super Mario
actually
Bros.
the exact antithesis of everything we've been talking about this entire podcast.
Ah.
There's somebody who got it and just did not give a crap about the source material. It did not matter. Like it was Mario and Luigi were two really grumpy, grungy plumbers in New York that find some weird toilet portal to the Mushroom Kingdom, which is like there's Koopas, and because that's what they're called, because that's a word from the game, so they called them that. But it's people with dinosaur heads, and there's like Bowser is like a guy with a T-Rex head or something, right? Or something it's so
he's like an
weird.
actual person.
It's such a terrible movie.
It's just awful all around.
Yeah, it's just they just did not. It was the early days of making any kind of adaptation movie where it's like video games
It
and comic
reveals
books
that
weren't real
Mario's last
things.
name is Mario, and Luigi's last name is also Mario.
That's actually funny because they are called the Mario Brothers, so it would be Mario, and Luigi Mario.
That's a little funny.
That's
Or-
correct, actually.
Or Luigi is just so second tier that he doesn't even get his name in the
In the Brothers.
Mario
He's just-
Brothers. Yeah.
All right, so moving on then.
So I guess the answer is no. There is no video game movie that has actually pulled this off
I
yet.
can't. Well, it only would have happened like outside of that example recently.
Right, it
'Cause
would have to be
video games
recent.
only really
and
started getting into that.
the most recent is Assassin's Creed, which is was playing, and
But you
it's
haven't
not
seen
good.
that.
I haven't, but it's got like a 30% on Rotten Tomatoes.
Yeah, and everybody loves the Amazing Spider-Man, also, right?
Well,
No, I dislike the Amazing Spider-Man immensely.
No,
Okay.
that's what I'm saying.
it would be worth. Okay, fine. Yeah, it would be worth watching. I may actually have different opinions on it.
Yeah, I think
Um,
it's. I would like to see it.
We should do that. Maybe we should do another podcast on video game. We should do a podcast on why has all the video game movies been disappointing, and watch like a selection of video game movies.
Well, what's
Get, like,
weird
Tomb
is
Raider.
I think
Doom
Zack Snyder
featuring
could
The
do it
Rock.
because
You
that's
think
what
so?
he makes
It would-
movies that look like video games.
Okay, well, I
like
think this actually is a mentality that I think messes up the video games, which is video games don't all look the same. I think Zack Snyder would be good at making some games. Like, if you gave Zack Snyder Gears of War, I think he could do that
Sure.
really well.
Yeah.
But he couldn't do Portal. right?
Right.
Like you have to have, I think, different, like video games are as diverse as movies are, so making a good adaptation involves getting somebody, it just kind of involves caring enough about it, and
yeah,
studios
Portal would be
don't.
hard visually.
I have heard that Valve is working with someone on a Portal movie.
That would be
actually.
really
I don't know how
dope.
accurate that is.
Why?
I don't know. I'm very, very concerned about it. It is Valve, and I've never had any reason to doubt anything Valve has ever done, except that no one's ever accomplished a video game movie before.
I
So
dig this idea.
I thought the
They're
same thing about
so
Assassin's
afraid
Creed.
of making a third in any video game series.
Yeah,
they
now
have,
they got to do the
that
movies
they're
first.
just gonna make the movie.
It's amazing.
Portal the movie 2. What next?
What next?
No, that's where it ends. It has to.
Yeah.
Half-Life 2 Part 3.
No, that's still got
I'm
a 3
waiting
in
for
it.
that. I'm waiting for that to happen.
Half-Life 2 Part 2.5.
Yeah.
There you go.
Start naming them like Square Enix games. 385 over 2.
There has to be video games that we're missing that were turned into movies.
Well, there was a Tomb Raider featuring Angelina Jolie. That wasn't good.
Right.
There
we
was
don't
a
talk about
Doom
that.
with The Rock. That also wasn't good.
Right, we don't talk about that.
Prince of Persia, I think, probably was the best, but just because it was a formulaic Hollywood movie that wasn't horribly disappointing,
Sure.
that was it. Like
yeah.
it was the best because it was the only one that hit mediocre.
Right.
It just hasn't been done yet. I
Yeah,
really
no.
thought Assassin's
Street
Creed was
Fighter
going
is
to be.
awful.
Oh, God, I forgot there was a Street Fighter.
The Mortal Kombat movie is
my
really
God.
bad.
So maybe this is just actually not a good idea. If no one can do
but
it.
everybody said the same thing about comic book movies until X-Men came along and showed people how you could make them not look ridiculous.
That's true.
And then Spider-Man jumped through the window they opened.
Yeah.
And then Iron Man came by and made like actually almost like an award-winning level film that happened to be about a
You
superhero.
put,
Comic
you
books-
put like Iron Man 1 up so high.
Yeah,
And
it's
I
great.
like Iron Man 1. Iron Man 1's a good movie.
It's one of
got
the best Marvel movies that
It's
exists.
got a lot of great things going for it, right? But
It is like the start
I don't.
of everything that
I
Marvel has
can't-
done.
I just can't like. Spider-Man 2 is way better.
I mean, you were actually in the minority on not liking Iron Man.
I like Iron Man
For the first time, I actually like have the backing of the general public behind me on how good a movie is with Iron Man, because that's sort of like that is like the magnum opus of Marvel that like started the whole thing.
That was good.
Spider-Man 2 also was great. I will not argue anything
Well, I
about.
think the thing about comics is they're a story, but they're a very minimized version of a story.
Let's talk
like,
about my actual favorite.
That's actually a good point too. I'll get to that
superhero
once.
movie.
but video games are a full done visual
Oh.
story that is potentially better than any movie you could make off of what they've already done with
That's
a
actually
story.
a good point. On that, sorry.
You're good.
Shelva, we'll come back to what you were going to say. But that is actually a good point because my usually where I end up in discussions on how to make a good video game movie is how about don't.
Make a good video game.
Because video games don't need to be movies; they're already video games, and they work as video games because it's an entirely different type of storytelling.
It's like an immersive movie.
It is, yeah. Like the best video games aren't even kind of similar. Like, could never be turned into a movie because they are entirely due to player interaction.
Yeah.
And it's the way the world interacts with you.
Right.
So I thought Assassin's Creed would be good because it's just like make a story in the world of the game. You don't have to make it be like the game. Just different story, same setting, but it's not the same thing. But
Right.
I actually think you're 100% correct. I think the best games cannot be turned into movies because of how good they are at being a game.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. What was your point?
My point is not a point. My point is my favorite superhero movie.
Oh, right.
Isn't Spider-Man?
No,
Okay.
it is not talked about a lot. In fact, it's it's the most underrated movie I feel ever.
Yeah.
It genre bends, like it combines two genres. It combines superhero movies, and it combines found footage movies.
Oh, are you talking about Chronicle?
I am talking about Chronicle. The Chronicle is great because it perfects both at the same time.
That was a dark
Like-
one, right?
Because you have like oh man, Sin City just came on. We could talk for hours about Sin City.
No, we
But-
can't because I haven't seen it.
Oh, okay, never mind then. We can't talk about it.
I still haven't seen Chronicle either, actually.
What?
I'm gonna mail it to you.
I don't understand how you haven't seen the movies that seem like
Right.
they would appeal to you the most.
I know. I'm so bad
So
at
here's the
seeing
thing,
movies.
right? It's a found footage
That's
movie.
why I have a podcast talking about movies.
The plot is this guy, of course, this kid who starts filming his life.
Right.
Because he decides that that's what he wants to do. He has definitely some issues. Like, he has a abusive stepfather, a very sick mom. He's in a poor family. He gets this like cheap camera and starts recording his life. He's a bit of a social outcast, you know, as normal.
Yeah.
And he goes to a party with his cousin. He brings the camera. He ends up like sitting outside alone because everyone thinks he's weird because he's just walking around with a camera, you know. So you've got like the shaky lens and stuff like that. And then like they all get superpowers. The most popular kid in class, and his cousin all go into this cave because he has the camera he's brought along with him to see this thing, and it gives them superpowers, and they become telekinetic. And then that's where the story goes with those three characters. But then there comes a point where it stops. It is still always found footage. The movie never stops being found footage.
Yeah.
But it starts having actual
Movie
cinematic
elements.
moments because the character stops holding the camera and starts floating it.
Oh, that's really cool.
So you get wide sweeping angles.
Nice.
You get like full 360 like shots and stuff like that, right? And that's what's happening in the middle of the movie. And like there's even points where like he has to like do something. Like they're all flying around and like one of them gets hit almost by a plane. And he's just plummeting and they're all way up in the air. And so he dives down and saves the guy, and he ends up dropping the camera. So the camera, of course, at that point, just free falls.
I'm really
It's a
curious
really
to see that
good
one.
movie, actually.
I'll have to watch
I
that
don't
one.
think it's based on anything, though, so that's the thing, is it sort of breaks rules here. It can't be considered, but it's definitely, as far as visual goes, like unique visuals in superhero movies go, that's one of the, also it's gotten really dark.
So final decisions. What would you say best?
I mean,
Submit your
can we-
best adaptation.
like, can we just say, like, can we vote for the best second? Because
Best
Scott
second.
Pilgrim wins.
Yeah.
Like, Scott Pilgrim is perfect in the transition from like
Yeah, that's a
its
good point.
novel to its visuals.
Okay, second best other than Scott Pilgrim.
Right, exactly. Best other than Scott Pilgrim. I'll stick with Kick-Ass 2.
That might be it. I can't confirm that. If you agree with him, then I'll go along with you.
She might say 300, because 300 is really good too.
300 is really good. It's a different type of comic book, though. Visually, it's
matter.
one of my favorites. But you know what? I'll stick with 300, not because I actually think it's better than Kick-Ass in terms of comic book to movie, but I think its visuals are so outstanding, and it plays with the idea that you can make movies feel like images and just
Right.
extend them, sort of. It's like if you took clips from a comic book and you just took an image from a comic, and then you decided to have all of your artistic freedom with what that would look like in real life.
look at
It
some
does
of
look
these
like a
shots.
drawing that starts moving. Kind
Yeah,
of.
it looks like a painting that's begun moving, and of course not this scene.
Actually, you know what it looks like? It like actually literally looks like this. It looks like that shot from The Secret Life of Walter Mitty with the photo of the explorer guy, and he
Yeah.
looks over and he like his hand starts moving and like motions for it. Like it actually looks like that.
Yeah, it does.
looks like a photograph that started moving while you were staring at it too long,
Yep.
which is really cool.
Yep.
All right,
It
well-
reminds me a lot of the Magic the Gathering trailers. Because like
I bet it's the
it's
blue.
really
Yeah,
cheesy.
well, because that's what it is, right? It's the moving artwork.
Right, the
I
Magic
think I've
Gathering,
actually
when they
seen some
make
of
the
them.
Magic the Gathering trailers, they started off really bad. They've gotten a lot better, but essentially it's a piece of artwork from the game, and then they make it move slightly.
Yeah.
It's nowhere near in scale of this, right? Because
Right.
then, you know, it
does have that
continues.
feeling, though.
That shot's really bad though. But it's what I can compare it to. It's like the moving artwork.
Yeah.
In a lot of the slow motion scenes, right? But there's a lot of other scenes, like even just like the Persian army, and you have like the like crazy goat god man coming out of the gold, you know. I don't know, the whole movie.
Yeah, I think there are lots of different ways to do, again, like kind of like following up on sort of how we ended the last podcast. It's like there's a lot of different ways to do the adaptation. I think a lot of it just has to do with sticking to the feel of what, like, it's of what you're adapting. Basically, it's sort of like like the whole like do things, know the reason that you're doing things. I think it's, to me, the thing that makes good adaptations stand out are when people know that what they're doing is they're trying to bring to life this feeling to the screen. And there's lots of different other things to talk about with adaptations also, like in the writing. But I think we covered it visually pretty well. Do you guys have any further thoughts on the subject?
Need to watch Kick-Ass.
Well, yeah, that's a good one.
Mad Max Fury Road is the best use of red I've ever seen.
That's not related, but I agree. My only further thought is you were you said something at some point that made me think, like, I can't remember. You mentioned something about comic book stories, and at some point I thought, actually, it might make sense to just not adapt some things because some things might be bad. We didn't really like touch up on that during the podcast at any point, but there are actually certain things where that's sort of where artistic liberties do come in. Yeah, I think, and are useful. Where if you're trying to adapt source material and you're like there's definitely something to be said for the ability to recognize when something doesn't really work in the source material and changing it appropriately to fit the new format you're putting it in. Because most comic books aren't actually great writing. Usually, like going back to, or that's not really visual based, but like just as an example, like the Marvel movies, to me, mean a lot more than the comics do, because a lot of the comics aren't good. Some of them are, a lot aren't. There's a much bigger gap, I think, in in bad comic writing to good comic writing.
Right. Can we end this with like an inverse? What's the best like reverse? Like what's the best like movie or TV show that got adapted into a comic?
Oh, I have no idea. Does that I guess that happens fairly frequently, but...
So, like, the ones I can think of is, like...
Shrek.
Buffy. What? The Whedonverse is where I first go,
That's true. They have, like, Firefly and
there's
stuff,
Firefly, and there's, And the Firefly, like, does pretty good, in my opinion. Like, the art style looks very... Like, it keeps that weird, like, semi-Asian look, you know? Yeah. Which I really liked.
That's cool. What about best video game movie or movie-based game, like the other way? Because we can't make any good movies based on games, but sometimes we can make some good games based on movies.
Okay, Shrek. So Shrek, kart racing.
I think the answer is Spider-Man 2 again, actually.
The answer is, I'm going to actually challenge you with The Incredibles on Xbox.
That one was pretty good. I played some of that. It was pretty good. It was actually the people who eventually went on to do the visuals of Team Fortress 2.
Way too good for a licensed game.
It was.
It had no business being as good as that was.
I still think the answer is Spider-Man 2. The Spider-Man 2 PS2 game was like...
Yes, that is a very good game.
Top game adaptation. So, yeah. Thanks for joining the podcast. I think we're about done.
Yeah. I think it's about
I think we talked ourselves out there.
Apocalypse outside now.
It does. Yeah, I don't know as we've been recording this podcast, we've actually slowly been turning into Zack Snyder color scheme the entire time we've been talking.
This is my doing. I was actually...
The world has turned gray. Yeah. But Ricky is still skin colored. I can see him.
That's good.
No, he's really not, actually. None of us. We're all like...
Actually, we actually Allison's getting the bluish hue.
We are almost going full Snyder here, so we should probably stop the podcast. Leave your opinions in the comments of this if you're watching on YouTube. If you have any suggestions on what you think is the best comic adaptation, drop us a line and let us know. If you also would like to suggest future topics, again, we are trying to come up with topics that we can use other movies as examples to illustrate those topics rather than just doing movie reviews. If you have any thoughts on that, leave them in the comments.
And we will respond in those comments. We will have an actual conversation with you guys. We're not always great about it, but we'll be working on that more so.
Allison's on that now, actually. That's her job.
We're all going to be on it. I might be typing, but the opinions of Door Monster will be shared.
Even if we don't respond, I will be actually including them in our list of future topics, so we might get to yours if you leave suggestions.
Talk to us.
Yeah. By next episode, we'll come up with a way to end these, but for now, bye.
Oh, bye. Bye.